Hello, everyone. This is Liz Willis, and I am speaking to you today on behalf of OPENurses to welcome you all to our continuation of our monthly conversation with a psychedelic nurse researcher, therapist, ally, or just a colleague or companion working in the field who helps us to learn more from one another in these fields that we all are so interested and called to working in. So today I'm in Ohlone territory, Ohlone land, San Francisco, and it's a beautiful day filled with sunlight and joy. And my heart is so happy to welcome a really powerful, dynamic woman that I know from my own spiritual journeys, working with sacred plant medicine and my spiritual path in studying in Shipibo and Nawa Mexica traditions. And so Rachael Jean Batchelder is a certified professional midwife, and she is an ally of ours that I am really looking forward to getting to know more deeply with you today in our conversation. I want to thank Andrew Penn for doing our tech today, and I'd like to welcome you all to introduce yourselves in our chat. Let us know who you are, where you're watching from, and what you're up to in the field of nursing or what you hope to achieve or accomplish. Always be respectful and mindful of your words with one another. We hold each other in the highest regard, and we want to honor each one of you. And I will go ahead and read to you from Rachael's bio now, and then we will introduce her and talk about her story and how she became a midwife and how she weaves all of these worlds together in her community and in her life and in her professional practice. And then we will have lots of time for questions at the end. So be sure that you are thinking of things you want to put out there in the universe, and we can all work with one another to explore these ideas together. So Rachael Jean Batchelder, she's a certified professional midwife, and I'll read to you her bio now. Having come to midwifery with a background in alternative healing through her study of massage therapy, sound healing, herbal medicine, and many other modalities, Rachael always felt a deep call to fuse these passions. Following graduation from Birthwise Midwifery School, she became a certified professional midwife, a CPM, in 2015 and began caring for clients and providing home birth in the rural mountains of Colorado. Rachael witnessed many home birth scenarios where women were left traumatized or let down by how their birth stories transpired. She felt a powerful need to honor the holistic experience of birth by addressing issues beyond the physical reality that had shown to play out and contribute to challenging births. Rachael created a synthesis based on her personal study of ancestral healing, transpersonal psychology, my apologies, and I will continue on, an earth-based spirituality that became the basis of the Elemental Birth Rites course journey. She is so excited to have a space to share her passion for exploring shadow work for healing, personal transformation, and her deep reverence for the sacredness of birth and her role in service to the ones who are choosing to be born at this time, along with the families welcoming these new spirits. Rachael is devoted to the art of birthkeeping in her practice, Elemental Midwifery. It's located in rural Maine. This is where she lives and where she takes each of her clients through the EBR journey. She completed several programs that deeply inform her work as a healer and birthkeeper, including Ventana's Ancestral Healing and Curanderismo program, the Globe Institute Massage program, and she is a current student of Gaia's Wisdom Flower Essence Practitioner program. Also, she's a Birthwise Midwifery School Graduate from 2015. And Rachael's work with sacred plant medicine ceremony is what led her to her path as a sacred birth keeper. She believes that the liminal spaces surrounding birth and death are closely related to the states of psychedelics and what they can provide and could support deeper preparation and integration of these massive life events. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rachael.
Hi, Liz. Thank you so much for having me, and greetings to everyone who's listening in the future and in the present. I'm so honored to be here and to be able to share.
Mhm. Well, Rachel, tell us a little bit about how you're doing today and where you are, where you live.
Yeah, so I'm in very rural Maine. I'm on the coast. We call this area down east Maine, which means that it is jutting out to the east. It is closest to the sunrise. And I am feeling amazing today. I think I may have found the land, which will become a future possible retreat center and grounding place for my whereabouts. So I'm very excited.
Well, that's incredible news. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Rachel, I'd like to know a little bit more about how you came to that decision that you wanted to buy land to create a center or a place for this work. Can you share a little of
Yeah.
that story?
Yeah, this has been actually, it feels like a lifelong path and dream that I feel like every time I settle back into the truth of my being and to sort of the purpose of my life in service
Mm.
to humanity, it just always comes back to me creating sanctuary for people to come and to do deep healing work with plants, with nature, with themselves, and in relationship. So it's just feeling like it is now time. I am on the brink, and it is time to step out and really bring this forth.
Great, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to everyone a little bit about how we met because I think there was this important moment in our training together where you crystallized the vision of your midwifery practice. And I would like to kind of introduce people to that part of our work. I know we're both healers and we know some really amazing people who've trained in different traditions, modalities, nationally and internationally, from all walks of life and backgrounds. And Rachel and I met in Santa Cruz, I think in 2019, for some advanced training in some of these modalities. And one of our tasks was to really think about our future and crystallize our personal mission statements. And I remember when you began to really put all this together, and now you have created your vision. And I'm so excited to hear more about that and the trajectory of your midwifery career.
Yeah, thank you so much, Liz. That was a really special time, and I'm so grateful that we were together and that we're still walking hand in hand, although with much distance, doing our good work in the world. And at that time, interestingly enough, it was 2011 when I was working within the context of sacred plant medicine ceremony when it came through that I was to become a midwife. And in that moment, I was really searching for, what is my path of service? So it was almost 10 years later that we were sitting in almost the exact same space on the same land where I was really starting to return to the fact that the ceremonies, working with the sacred medicines, were really my entryway and my portal into supporting birth. And I was coming back around to realize that throughout my training, I really had to let go a lot of what drew me into birth in order to become, a licensed professional. And it was 2019 when you and I were sitting there together, and it's now 2022. And I have created and birthed the new vision of my midwifery practice, which is really integrating birth as a ceremony and really showing up for people prenatally during pregnancy, preparing them for their birth as a sacred ceremony, with the Holy Sacrament being that of birth itself. And so when you were talking in my bio about life and death and, the sacred transitions, I really feel that this coming into fruition of my career and really returning to what led me into birth work, being plant medicine, led me back to myself and closer to, the way that I show up as a supporter of birth and a midwife, bringing people more into the depths of their soul as they enter into these realms of interdimensionality that are birth, that are death, that are, so deeply profound in the human experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's so true. And I'm so sorry about the echo of the sound, everyone. Please accept that. My apologies. Um, and I want to kind of bring this around to nurses and why your work is so valuable, and also the integrity with which you align, the organic lifestyle, all the nature-based traditions and paths, and the way you walk the walk and talk the talk. And so I think you really symbolize that for me as an example of someone who has learned these lessons and integrated them successfully. And nurses, we are at the bedside for all of those rites of passage, all of those transitions. And, we are incredible witnesses and impeccable holders of space during these times. But it takes a toll on us. So this is one aspect of why I think and believe developing either a spiritual practice or doing your shadow work or having these connections to your community, to the land, to your family, these bigger things, they keep us solid in our path, right? And so that's the first aspect. And then the second is it's these altered states of consciousness that you were talking about, right? That luminous, that vermilion border that we're thinking of. And a lot of our viewers are new to the field of psychedelic assisted therapies and research. And while I know that you're in a different part of those rites of passages and ritual, it's those altered states where people find our patients, find their families, find those survivors of trauma, find all those birth stories and prenatal stories coming up, and especially in the medicine work. And so I think it's great to make this connection between what you do and how you practice and live to nursing, and ways that we can look to these examples and learn from you. So are there some things you would kind of, talk to nurses in our audience about what you have created with elemental midwifery? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that I offer my nurses about is being able to work in the system. Like, I really honor the struggle that it takes to be holding space for such powerful rites of passage and having to do it within a system that has a lot of rules. And I'm very, very blessed to be working outside of the system. And that being said, I think it is so essential, and I honor you and your colleagues for holding down the grid of sanctity and bringing that into the spaces that need it the most. Because I don't actually, I personally am not able to choose that for myself, but I know and feel that is so needed. And in that way, what's even more needed is that you and your colleagues are resourced when you go into those spaces, because it really can be so difficult and so challenging to hold that thread of viewing the sacred, because you truly are witnessing the sacred in every moment as you witness people in their processes and in their life experiences, and sometimes in some of the most major life events that they might come across. Supporting them within that system, have to have spiritual practices, I really feel, that ground you and help you to be sustainable in your work, so that you have somewhere to go to fill up your tank, so that you can give the way that you're asked to give in that role. You're muted.
Thanks, Rachel. Trying to work with the sound here. So what do you think that your work as a midwife has taught you about these connections with the unconscious, and with these rites of passage that we're talking about? Like, give us some examples of things that have come up for you that we could bring to nursing, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. So actually, it was one of the most defining births of my career that shifted my way of being. And I was in a birthing scenario with a first-time mother at home, and she was in early labor for a very long time, and she decided to call me over to come and be with her earlier than maybe I should have come. But since she was a first-time mom, I really wanted to be there for her. She was also had been like a friend before. So I had this loyalty towards her. And as we went through this journey of attempting a home birth, days passed and she was at a point of exhaustion and the baby wasn't descending and there wasn't any more progress happening in the labor. And so we went to the hospital. And we went to the hospital and it was a sequelae. First the baby didn't sound good and they were, started to induce her. And then she went and she had to have an emergency C-section. And when I got out of that birth, she decided that she felt that I was at fault for what had happened. And it really broke my heart. It really broke my heart because obviously my intention was to preserve everything that she had wished for. But I think in my blindness of the situation, what I really learned is that people's trauma comes up during the meeting or the intersection with the rites of passage experience. It could be working with psychedelics. It could be, a life, a birth, a loss, a miscarriage, all of these types of experiences. There's an intersection where you meet with yourself, you meet with your trauma, all of the things that have come to culminate to make you who you are come and they're amplified in that space. And in that moment, what I felt was that my commitment was to see that people are able to integrate their experiences in these liminal spaces being maybe the most important thing. Yes, it's important that they're healthy and it's important that, people are in safe situations, but most important is how that person thinks about what they just went through. Like, how do they feel about their story? And in that seeing, I really felt the call that all of the work is really about what is below the surface. What has happened to you as a child? What have you been dealing with as a repeating pattern in your life, in your relationships, with your work, with your home? That these pieces are what create scenarios that people are able to become empowered by. And so as this relates to your organization and working with people through these liminal spaces, I think that, unpacking trauma and preparing for these types of experiences is the most important part of gaining any type of empowerment, any type of integratable experience through these experiences. I really feel that everything leading up to it is so imperative and takes so much care and so much nurturing. And with the right guidance, which I feel like is really what psychedelic assisted therapy is about, some really deep and profound healing is possible. And really, psychedelics are the only way that I see meeting with these states of mind being possible before something like a birth experience or a dying experience. There's really no way to prepare that I have at least experienced in my life besides, voluntarily entering into some type of a ceremonial container with entheogens. That's just been my experience of the only way that I see that we can access this multidimensionality without years of rigorous training in metaphysical, techniques, which we don't really necessarily have in our culture.
Thank you. Would you mind speaking a little bit to ritual and ceremony and how you've incorporated that?
Absolutely. So yeah, coming to midwifery with this background in plant ceremony, what I really came to see about ceremony is that the intention is one of the biggest pieces of what creates safety in a container. And it's actually one of the biggest modalities of healing. So I've touched a lot of bodies and I've done a lot of healing work and studied a lot of modalities. And there's the, okay, do this, the technique. And then there's what happens below the surface that actually plays maybe 90% of what unfolds in the healing. And that's really the intention that any practitioner brings into a session. And so when I think about ceremony, I think about a lot of actions that have meaning. And then I think about the person leading it and what their intention is and how they're taking those action steps with an underlying operating from an intention of healing, an intention of safety, an intention of transformation, bringing that in with their consciousness. And when I think about ritual, I think of ritual as sort of all the little pieces that make up a ceremony. So I don't necessarily get to practice ceremony every day, but I do get to practice ritual every day. And so I have, many personal rituals that I engage in daily that support me to hold that consciousness and that presence in my intention when I am in a ceremony, such as a birth, which I don't get to plan for when those happen. And maybe I do plan a ceremony to sit with certain medicines and just drop into myself. But the rituals that I engage in, throughout the day, maybe working with my altar, sitting at my altar, setting prayers, writing in my journal, setting intentions for how I want to feel or what it is that I want to create. And even just something simple like receiving a cup of tea or receiving the communion of bathwater when I sit in it, and actually having that deeper conversation with the water where I'm actually becoming, in communion with the water and treating her as a sentient spirit, and then allowing her to guide me, to teach me, and to communicate with me.
Now, can you translate that to how you work with the women that are your clients and their partners, their families?
Absolutely. And I wanted to say one more thing about ritual, because I had a very wise woman who's in one of my trainings mention the ritual of the technical skills that any, doctor, nurse, or midwife would bring to, for instance, a pregnancy. So we have the medical rituals, such as taking blood pressure, measuring the baby, listening to the baby's heart rate. A lot of people are getting more ritualized ultrasounds. These medical rituals actually ground women into their pregnancy. In our culture, that is a ritual, right? So it's just about the intention is like, okay, we're focusing on the pregnancy, we're focusing on the client care. And in that moment, the client is receiving that type of intention and attention about the state of their human experience. And so she shared that, and I really saw how the rituals that I'm bringing to my clients, they're more nature-based, but we always still do include generally these types of little medical rituals that help women to feel grounded in the experience of being pregnant. So, taking the blood pressure and asking them how they're sleeping and checking in on them. But then I bring this other layer based on my life experience that I have found to be super supportive, especially in pregnancy, which is more about like grounding into the earth and creating altars on the earth, creating practices such as like, feeling your body connected to the earth, something simple, a guided meditation that's going to help a woman to feel that she is supported by something bigger than herself. We have, Mother Earth templating all of our bodies with unconditional love and providing all the food we need. So I will actually recommend these types of rituals to the women that I work with during their pregnancy to help them practice entering into ritual space in a more conscious way and in a less medicalized way, although we have the medical ritual, just to remind them and give them practices while they're not, sitting before me, to ground into their pregnancy, to ground into their body, so that when they're in their birthing ceremony and they've come into that moment that they've been living towards, they are practiced in the art of ritual, and they're practiced in the intention of becoming present to what is.
Reasons I think that's important for nurses is we work with women who lose their child in the childbirth process, even a stillborn full-term child, or miscarriages, or there are often so many women who choose to have a therapeutic abortion or have had a miscarriage, or been down so many roads, so many layers, so much shame and stigma, or just profound grief and loss. So we see this firsthand. And then a lot of work people do on the flip side comes up in ceremony, or in the medicine work, or with ketamine. This is all part of the path they have to do to reconcile those or to see them in a new light. So what happens when you're dealing with those losses? are teaching women how to integrate those losses and to grieve?
Absolutely. This is a really personal question for me because it's actually my only orientation to birth. So actually experienced two first trimester losses in my adult life, which have really guided me, not only the spirits of those children that didn't come through or that did come through, but also those experiences of birthing death. That was my experience, have been so informative to me in my practice and in my understanding of the importance of grief in life, actually holding a polarity with love and with expansion. So when it comes to dealing with loss, I think that the the cultural narrative is to like smush it under the rug. But I actually have a mini course, and I openly talk about this with people, that I think that going into the grief and really allowing space for the grief is the healing. And it really is the way, so that when you're processing and, working to come into wholeness around what has happened for you, it's about going into it. And that's why I'm always supporting shadow work. But when it comes to a loss, I think some of the most important things that a woman can do is name her baby, honor that child, because that is an ancestor now that works with her every day. And so for me, that was a personal experience of bringing those children onto my altar as spirit guides that I work with, that guide me in my offering and in my service to women. And so I could feel how that is taboo, because, a lot of people want to kind of move forward and forget that child was lost, and it seems like they should just get pregnant again. But what I've really found is that for the women who don't get a chance to process the grief that is experienced through loss, it generally comes up as a fear in their subsequent pregnancies. So not only naming, but having some type of a ritual burial, if they're able to obtain any tissue, and or just, some type of a ceremony of closing that acknowledges all that the medicine that child brought by being within them, by walking with them for that time. So I have like a whole protocol that I suggest to the women that I work with. But in terms of, thinking about doing trauma work around these types of losses, I think really allowing yourself to feel the sadness and to feel all the emotions that come with loss is really the most important part of processing any type of experience that has such a profound effect on your being.
Now, that brings me to another important thing, that you mentioned the word altar. And I know we've learned altar work and we've done some deep work together. This kind of is tied into our other path together in the moon dance ceremonies. And it's a big question that comes up a lot in psychedelic assisted therapies, research plant entheogens. And it's kind of pertaining both to the moon dance and to ayahuasca. And the incorporation of the things we've learned from different traditions and different lineages and cultural appropriation. So my question for you, Rachel, is how do you incorporate these different traditions, these different practices that we hold so dear, that have helped us heal so deeply? How do you hold it honorably and with great respect for the traditions? Being a white woman, in the United States, and privileged and entitled, and what do you think about that? The oppressor we are, our mentality, where we've been taught everything. And how do you work with this in your own personal spiritual practice and your midwifery practice?
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, it's a really big topic. There's a lot of energy circulating around all of this now. I walk with a lot of humility, and that has been something that I've learned to do over time. Obviously, having privilege is just a walk that we have to navigate with a lot of grace. And I really do look to my elders. That is what I have learned in this path, is that walking within a lineage that is intact and getting permission to pretty much at every step of the way has been one of the most important lessons for me in stepping forward in my work. I'm very, very blessed to have amazing teachers that come from an unbroken lineage, that go back in time and can name the permissions of their grandmothers and the people that have passed ceremony onto them. And I walk and I tread very lightly, very, very lightly. And in terms of how I honor it in my spiritual practice, it's really just, asking for forgiveness ahead of time and really being open to feedback and teachings from anybody in any direction who has any issue with my walk. I try to walk really lightly and just be able to listen and be somebody who can receive feedback and adjust accordingly has been the best way that I've learned, just to be open, to try to put defenses down and really be able to listen to my elders and also my teachers, and anyone who has anything to say about me walking, in a path that maybe their ancestors carried, so I try to do that with great respect and reverence for any people that I'm walking beside who might actually have a direct blood lineage to the path that I'm walking in. I hope that addresses it, but there may be more specific practices that you're interested in knowing that aren't coming through quite yet.
Yeah, we'll see if those unfold in our conversation or if folks have questions about those. And I'm wondering, you've spoken so much about a lot of the other questions I wanted to ask you, your self-care, qualities that a midwife or nurse might develop, to thrive and grow in this field. And I'm wondering if I could ask you a few more specific questions, kind of about what training you received and what training you would recommend to midwives or nurses, and how you got to where you're at in the more the Western model as well, please.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very privileged to have been trained in a wonderful midwifery school that also honored tradition and herbal medicines and other alternative therapies. I feel very grateful for my education in that way. But I would say that my education, honestly, walking the spiritual path that I've been walking, doing the Curanderismo program that you and I met in, was one of the most profound trainings that I've been a part of. And I think so much of it was really just about working with my ancestors. So you were just asking about lineage, and I think that one of the ways we can really start to sort out the cultural appropriation question is through working with our own lineages directly, building altars and really going inside in an embodied way to contact our ancestors and learn, why we are guided to be who we are. And, because our heart is leading a lot of the time in terms of like what we're interested in and what we are exploring in our experience. And there are roots and tendrils of our roots that spread back in time that we may not have spoken to that grandparent or elder in our own lineage directly, but we feel them moving through us. And so that course and building the 4 altars in that particular training was extremely profound for me, and just activating a lot of healing for me within my own lineage. And then learning how that vein was coming alive within me and guiding me forward in my path with a lot of clarity. And so, yeah, it kind of relates to the last question, but getting clear with your ancestral lineage and healing just your own family, which starts with yourself, and really looking to how you were parented, and looking at, your sexuality and, how you've walked your life, and making amends in those ways by just becoming aware, doing ritual, doing ceremony around that, really activated a lot of healing for me, a lot of ancestral karma clearing. It really made it possible for me to step into my marriage and do that in a way that felt very conscious and felt like it was sustainable for me in my life. That was really profound. And I recommend, spiritual practices for anybody who wants to do work that's in service. I really feel like, it's so great to get the technical skill, and I'm so grateful for it. And I also don't think that I could be where I'm at now without that skill and that training, because it's given me the confidence to actually support people, as a maternity provider in people's homes. If I didn't have those skills, I wouldn't feel at all capable to be holding that type of responsibility. But then on another note, it feels like the responsibility that I hold and the ability to step into that with clarity has really clarified through my work healing myself and actually coming into integrity within my own being, which that training really provided for me in my path. I also feel that I'm now in a flower essence practitioner training, and I am very, very pumped about working with subtle medicine, because while I just adore psychedelic therapy and I think that plant medicine work is incredible, it's not for everyone. And in that way, working with the flower essence and the subtle medicine of psychedelic plants, shamanic plants, all types of flowers, and just really going into all plants are medicine and all plants have the power to heal us on an emotional level. I'm just excited because I get to take my love of plants and just share it with everyone. And I'm just like thrilled about learning more about flower essences and spreading that message and that work even deeper into the work that I'm already doing with people, unpacking childhood trauma. So there's so much there.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thank you. How do you see that childhood trauma manifesting in a home birth scenario, or before or after? How do you witness that?
Absolutely, yeah. So I was sharing that experience about that mama who had ended up with cesarean, which was not her birth plan, and was blaming me for it. And I didn't really finish that thought, but what it came down to is that people's wounds with their mother and father generally show up within a repeating pattern. And as a midwife, and I'm sure you might experience this as a nurse, we are playing the role of universal mother. We are playing the role of the loving mother, the nurturing mother. When we come to people's bedsides, when we come to support them in their hardest moments, we really are stepping into the archetypal mother. And when people have wounding and betrayals with their mother, we often get within that archetypal dance projected upon, and our intentions for helping and supporting will be thwarted, because people who have unhealed trauma with their mother, with their father, with themselves, generally will project those wounds outward because it's too painful to own the source of it. And I got very, very tired of not only repeating a lot of the patterns that stem from my own mother wound, but I also got very exhausted being in the selfless service and then having families maybe see me through the lens of their wounding and then miss the intention that I was bringing, which was love, unconditional love, support, and wanting them to have a beautiful transformational experience. So really the way that I see this play out is through medical complications. When people have unhealed trauma, generally those aspects of people's wounding will show up first in the energetic field. And then when that is not addressed, they will show up in the physical and the emotional fields. And so what I really wanted to do when I wanted to work through people's traumas, I wanted to avoid unnecessary medical interventions in my practice, because I really felt that the physical realm is the last place that trauma shows up. So when we're dealing with physical issues, blocks like labor dystocias, and really traumatic physical expressions of trauma, we've already missed all the signposts in the energetic subtle fields and the emotional fields. And so by focusing in on the emotional and subtle fields first, unpacking and delayering all of the trauma that people are carrying as they walk through their lives, when we get into such a physiological event such as birth, such as death, such as sitting in maybe a sacred plant ceremony, we're more clear. And we can actually just do the task at hand without having to process all of the layers of trauma in that moment when you're going to be under-resourced. You're not going to necessarily be able to navigate those spaces with the strength and resourcefulness that you would need. So, birth is hard. It's really, really hard for people to live through that experience in the same way that I've seen people in ceremony have a really hard time physiologically, whether it just be like rejecting the medicine or just really wanting to be out of the experience before it's time to be out of it. That if you're able to work through those things that come up for you when you're in those spaces, ahead of time without the pressure of the intensity, it really creates for deep and profound realization and transformation that can lead to integrating these experiences in a way where you're healing your life, you're able to step out in a new way, you're not walking with the same patterns anymore, and you're actually upgrading your consciousness. And then you have so much more to offer in the world, as well as just joy at your fingertips to experience, which I'm all about. I want to make this a really good world.
You are. Thank you. I would like to invite the audience now to put questions in the chat. We'd love to start hearing from you at any point. But Rachel, you talked about something important that comes up all the time. And this is something that I have struggled with for years and still do. It's that energy. So, I've been in the ER and I'm finally trying to transition out. And it's this energy, and you're carrying all these people's stories all the time, and you're in fight or flight like for 12 hours, and you've got report from the medics or law enforcement, you've got the patients' families, the patients, and interacting with everybody at this high level of professionalism in fight or flight, right? And you get no breaks, and it's carrying this energy. And I've had to learn and develop and grow about how I carry this energy and transference and countertransference. And you were speaking of the projections. As a nurse, we get those projections immediately from everybody all the time. And, there's a lot of expectations and a lot of demands, but energetically, I can speak for myself personally, I've held those stories. I've held those patients' stories. And the first time I discovered that was in the jungle, and the medicine taught me. And I've had many experiences reconnecting with the patients that I either couldn't save or who had come to another place and were communicating with me, or I was making peace with whatever forces may be. And myself, right? And then the purging, the cleansing. So I learned all of these things about energy. But what I'm still struggling with is, how do I hold my own container and not take that on and have it not become toxic? And some people are really great at that, and some of us struggle. So I'm wondering if you can teach some of us some of the things you do to hold that container in the moment, to protect your energy and to not carry it forward, and to be able to clear it, to cleanse it, to release it in a healthy way.
This is a dance that I feel like I am still so young on. I also agree with you that I am a very deep empath, and it is extremely challenging for me to deal with, especially projections where I feel like I'm being seen as the perpetrator when my intention was to support and help. It's really hard for me to hold that. I've been working with the flower essences, and there's a lot of plants that are very protective. Like, as you know, tobacco, we use tobacco when we're working in the sacred plant ceremony because it protects the energy field. So there are other plants such as yarrow and St. John's wort and angelica that just taking a flower essence of this plant and going into situations when you know that are going to be in volatility. There's a lot of energy, and you are in a place where you're going to be interacting with a lot of people who may or may not have any consciousness of how they use their energy. Working with these essences has actually created a huge breakthrough for me in being able to contain my energy and feel clean, like white sage. I've been working with white sage for years, and I knew it was a protective essence, but it's also protective as a flower essence. And it just helps you, what is yours? What did you come into work with already? And what is not yours? And really knowing when it comes into your field, the granularity of it, you actually recognize it. You're like, that's not mine. So I'm not going to cycle that. And that has been the hardest thing for me, is knowing, once something enters into my system, knowing how to have that choice, whether to let that story in or not. And so the flower essences have been helping me in a big way. And this is like recently. But in terms of, for people in your field, I think really having grounding exercises, like those rituals that I practice every day, they're pretty important. And I would recommend that anybody who's in a place of service and working with people in highly energetic spaces, that having these types of rituals, like bathing for me is huge. I love taking baths and really making it into a ritual, because I really do feel that it cleanses something deep within me, especially if I bring that intention of asking the water to take what is not mine and like show me how to let it go, because I'm still learning how to let it go. But I know that there are like lots of teachings about this, and I feel like I want to learn more, because as a person working in this field and working with people, it's so important for avoiding burnout and being able to actually hold this role with a lot of integrity. We all have to have the ways that work for us, and I think there are so many ways. And flower essences just happen to be have been highly supportive for me of recent. So I'll share that.
Thank you. I know something about you that I'd like to share with the audience, and that is that, well, the music shines through you. And one of the things you do as a gift in your ceremonies in the moon dance, and this, everyone in the audience, is without medicine. This is um, a 4-day, 4-night prayer ritual, and women gathering together in community in prayers for Mother Earth, healing the planet, healing ourselves, akin to the sun dance in the Lakota tradition. It's in the Nahuatl lineage, where Mexico, where we have danced together. And Rachael is a drummer, and she sings, and she can explain this better. That she is as part of the sacred conduit for this dance, and holds the energy of all of the dance. And I'm speaking about this because this is a way to achieve an altered state of consciousness, and this is important for many of you who are naive to the psychedelic medicines or plant entheogens, or who are well versed in them. There are alternate ways to achieve altered states of consciousness. And in our country, most of these medicines are illegal, right? And as nurses, we never want to jeopardize our licenses, or midwives. And it's hard for people to make it to another country to gain experience and work and do the work. And a lot of things aren't accessible or currently legal. And we have a lot of hopes for the future, a lot of things in the works. But there are ways to gain practice in these altered states, in addition to holotropic breath work. And I just was hoping what you could describe what you do a little.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot more for me to deepen into this, but working with drumming as a shamanic practice, for entering into trance state and for entering into altered states of consciousness, I feel so honored to be able to hold the drum of our moon dance circle. And it really is so interesting when you started out that, because music has always been such a profound anchor for me into ceremony, into altered states of consciousness, because when I sing, when I open up that channel of creativity, I really do feel like my ancestors come through. They come through for me. And I didn't used to associate it with my ancestors. That's like a newer piece that I've learned throughout my journey. But drumming is an age-old technique of trance, of entering into trance. And I've been reading this book, When the Women Were Drummers. And it's just about the practice of drumming as a sacred act that women have always carried. And I feel like, throughout the ages, maybe that has moved out of that. That's not necessarily the practice of women, but now returning to it, I really feel that within my womb, that this practice of drumming, which anybody can drum on anything, and following that heartbeat really brings us into the womb. When we were in our womb of our mother, and all we had auditorily, maybe we could hear our parents' voices at a certain point, but we always had that heartbeat. And when we return to that heartbeat and we just tune into that, it's just like tuning into your breath. It can bring you into another dimension of attention that is removed from that monkey mind that we're usually paying attention to, or, semi-disconnected from, that can really keep us anchored in this 3D reality and keep things sort of a one note. But just moving with music, getting the opportunity to drum at the dance, and also practicing drumming, pretty much as I possibly can. It really is such a potent way for accessing altered states of consciousness. And it's a beautiful way, I feel like, for discharging as well. Like, I've had moments when I have a lot of energy and I need to move it out, and I will get my drum out and sing, and I feel such a release of any kind of narrative. I feel in my body, I feel brought to the moment, I feel present. And it really truly is such an easy and accessible way to access, all of the realms, really. And there's practices and trainings in shamanic drumming and journey work that I would like to go much deeper into, especially working with the flower essences and learning how to journey with plants, and to go and like receive guidance from plants without even having to necessarily ingest large quantities of medicines, just like subtle, tuning in with a plant and then having conversations with them. I think drumming is the way. It is the way in.
Fantastic. Now I have a question for you, and it is something you might have touched a little bit earlier, but please add more. Is there a role in preparation for a person who is planning on giving birth, this is before conception, of course, or in integrating the difficult birth experience?
Yes, I feel like if there was any way for midwives to move into psychedelic assisted therapy, this would be where I would want to put my energy. It would be about, women who are planning on getting pregnant, actually bringing them into a sacred plant ceremony and guiding them into that realm in order for them to either heal from something that happened in a past birth and be able to access all of that emotion and all of the somatic storage of memory of that trauma, as well as for people who have never birthed and never really entered into that space before. I think that this is like the perfect application of psychedelic assisted therapy for really preparing women for what it will be like when they go into labor, how they will feel their consciousness shifting into another plane, and getting them more comfortable with that transition into the plane and learning how to navigate the physiology of being in those spaces before they enter in. I think it's like, it would be amazing. And if it's not, happening on a midwifery level, I feel like that's the nurse's role, is like holding that safe space for women before they conceive, who are planning to be able to touch into those spaces and feel prepared in some way for the birth experience. Thank you for that question. I love it.
Now we have another question, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this work, but Stan Groff is one of the pioneering psychedelic researchers, psychedelic warriors, and he has a body of work on the perinatal matrices. And we learned about this in our CIS program and have learned about it otherwise. Are you familiar with this body of work?
I'm not. I want to be, though. This sounds amazing.
We wanted to hear, because there's a lot of discussion about it in the psychedelic therapy world, and whether it is valid, true, or accurate. And there's a lot of different opinions about it, especially from women and feminism. And so was just curious. So we won't take that question on, but the question was, could you comment on the midwifery perspective on Stan Groff's perinatal matrices? There's been some critique from birth workers on that. So we'll be sure to share that work with you so you can learn more about it and let us know what you think.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to checking that out.
Okay, and then I want to give you some time. We've got about 5 minutes left, and not more questions at the time, but if we get any in the future, we'll share them with you. So I want to open the floor to you to talk about anything that you think is important about midwifery in this time of great turmoil and conflict, and maybe what you've already spoken so eloquently about what the different plant medicines and spiritual work and journeys bring, but anything else that's important to you and that you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I really feel like, my work wanting to support families to do ancestral healing as a prep for birth is so deeply connected to psychedelic assisted therapy, because really what I feel at the very core of the service that we are being called to do is create a more healed society for the future generations. And I feel deeply passionate that people like us are being called into action to step up, because we know that there is a better way of operating possible within our human society. And it's going to take each of us doing the work, which I feel like, we've been walking on this path. And once you get deeper and deeper into the path of self-healing, it becomes completely self-evident that it is not just for yourself, that as you clear these channels and become a more integral person and a holistic, potentiality of what it means to be a human, that ultimately we are doing this work to support each other in coming into wholeness, so that the little ones who are coming through, who are going to be stewarding this planet that we are so blessed to walk on, have a better opportunity to start off with less trauma and less healing necessary, so that they can, thrive and have a beautiful world with clean water and food and harmony in society. So I just feel really called that, the work that we're doing, it's all the same. And there are so many routes for bringing healing into the world. And I'm just so grateful that, that nurses are working on this plane, because it is so needed within the field of the medical realm. And that institution really needs a lot of reform. And I feel like this movement within nursing to bring in these sacred plants really is a huge catalyst for the evolution of the medical system to be actually something that serves people and really gives the healing that is needed. And I'm excited to be walking on this path at this time with women like yourself and people that are in your organization, because I feel like we all have the same goal, and it is such a valiant goal, and it's just really to bring healing and create a better world. So that's my soapbox.
And thank you so much for being on your soapbox with us today. I'm forever grateful to you, and so glad that we are walking this path together and helping to really bring these medicines honorably to the Western medical model, beyond to the rural homes in Maine, Colorado, all over the world. And thank you, Rachael.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you so much for everything. This was awesome.
Well, everyone, we welcome you to reach out, join our organization, help us to change the world together and design the future. And have a wonderful day wherever you're listening from.